Hello, my name is Pablo Zinger, and these are Principles of Spanish Diction for Singers. First chapter, vowels. In Spanish there are only 5 vowels written and 5 vowel sounds. So that's the beauty of it. If you stick to those 5 vowels, you learn them well, then you will be able to sing beautifully. The problem is if you're not consistent and you vary them, then you're in trouble, because those would not be Spanish vowels. So let's start with the A vowel, which is pronounced A, as in casa, mama, papa, banana. It's similar to the English vowel in the word mine, if you make it very open and very long. So if you say mine, ah. It's important also to keep in mind that the difference between a and o will determine gender. So for example, perra and perro mean female dog and male dog, or anything of the kind. Gato, gata. Linda, lindo. So in this case it's pretty, feminine or masculine. This is very important because you have to be clear, otherwise we'll have a case of gender confusion in Spanish. So one thing you don't want to do is to mix the a with other vowels. If you're going o, that's confusing to us. We don't know that whether that's an a or an o. It's an o. We don't have that vowel. We don't have, for example, the vowel in the word law. We have either la or lo. So you have to be very clear. We also don't have the schwa. So we don't have banana. We have banana. All the a's have to be equal. Even if they are short, even if they are unaccented, it's always a. Abracadabra. Only when you're going above the passaggio for a singer, when you're doing real high notes, then you can mix, where you cannot really do ah. So you go ah, you cover. But otherwise, stick to a anywhere below your passaggio. So the second vowel would be the e vowel. We don't have closed e and open e. So we don't have e or e. We have only e. For example, excelente or excelente. All the s are equal. So as a singer, you don't want to go into e. That's too mixed with e. E, too close. And you don't want to go you don't want to go too open. So it's kind of in the middle. E, excelente, elefante, and so on. If you are going to do anything with that vowel singing wise, you might round it to where your lips are slightly O-like. Now with the E vowel, all the E vowels will be E as in C, E as in T, never as in sit or bit. We don't have E vowel. Very important. So we only have sheets, not the other one. So be careful that you don't go something like limite, limite, imitar. All the E's are a C and T and to be. Now with the O is a similar case to the E. We don't have O and O. We don't have lobby. We don't have an open O. Lobby. No. We have lobby. The lobby. So oso. Horroroso. Oh, part of my singing, of course. O. Close O. No o. Because that again is to us between vowels. It's neither o nor a, it's o. We don't want that. It's either oso or asa. And then finally, the u. The u is very simple, it's always u. Rather close, not u. U. Uruguay, my country. Now, besides those vowels, there are really no exceptions to the fact that everything has to be a, e, o, u. But there are cases in which we have elisions or diphthongs. Elisions, example, very frequently in a song you'll have te amo. But if the composer, instead of going te amo, goes te amo, puts the two first syllables in one note, instead of having te amo, you have ti amo. So you go, the e becomes a y, and the main vowel will be the a. So instead of te amo will be ti amo. So the e becomes kind of obliterated. The same would happen with an o. Lo amo, I love him, for example. Lo amo. If you put the two together in one note, instead of lo amo, you put lo amo. The o becomes a W sound, loa, or no amo, noir, like noir in French. So, lo amo, the o has become a W and just a passing semi-vowel sound. Similar thing happens in some diphthongs. There are not that many diphthongs in Spanish, but for example, a word like reina, queen, you would sing the e longer and the e would become shorter just at the end. Reina. So you would leave the e part of it, reina, the e part of it for the very end of it, and that also becomes like a semi-vowel. Reina. So it's minimal. Another example, amasteis. You, plural, have loved. Amasteis. So the is left for the end. And I think with that we have covered the Spanish vowels. A, e, I, o, u. Those are the only sounds that you're allowed to make. No u, no I, no a, no a, and so on and so forth. Hello again, this is Pablo Zinger. This is chapter 2 of Spanish Diction for Singers. This is dedicated to the complicated issue of the R consonant, which can be pronounced as a rolled R or as a flipped R. First of all, let's define what's a flip and what's a roll. And the flip may be more difficult to you than a roll. A roll is easy. Rrr, arra, orro, erra, urri, etc. Rrr. But the flip is a little more complicated, as in oro, ara, era, cara, irá, iremos, Europa, Uruguay, etc. Now, as far as what equivalent you have in English to that sound, really when you say in kind of Brooklyn English, you got it, the water, get it, that sound, you got it, ari, that's to me as in árido. You got it, árido. You gotta go, gotta, cara. Gotta, cara. Of course, it's not exactly the same, the vowels are different, but that sound that to you might sound like a D or T, in Brooklyn English, that's a sound exactly of a flip. Another issue, technical issue with the flip, is when you're going from vowel to vowel, don't close your mouth. So don't go ara. It's ara. You see I'm not closing my mouth. Ara. The only thing that moves is the tongue with a flip of the tongue. Era. Oro. So don't let the vowel, the first vowel, collapse. Just make sure you hold the shape of the vowel and then just move your tongue for the flip. Now, when do you use this flip R? There are many cases. Everything in Spanish has a rule. So if you know the rule, you know how to apply it. First flip. Between vowels, single R written. Example, cara, caro, era, irá, oro, Uruguay, etc. In all those cases, there is no exception. When there is a single R written between vowels, that's what happens. That's not only within a word. For example, if you have a singing phrase that goes amor, 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 amor is the word love, but when you repeat it without breathing, amor, 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 even though the R is final in the word, it is followed by another vowel. So that means that it also becomes intervocalic. Another example of flipped R is after consonant. Now be careful. There is a difference between after consonant and before consonant. So we'll get to the before consonant later because that's a roll. After consonant, we don't roll. Example, abre, abre, open, abre. Another one, acre, ocre, creo. So it's not ocre, creo. It's not abre. It's abre, acre, creo, criatura. In all of those cases, after consonant, you flip. You don't roll. Practice creo, 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 creo. Not creo, creo. No roll. Another example, very important. Madre, padre. Madre, padre. We don't say madre, padre. That sounds very, very strange and wrong to us. Frecuente. Africano. That's with an F. Very important. The word gracias or gracias in Castilian Spanish. Gracias, gracias. In either case, no roll, no gracias or gracias. With a T is the same case. Atrás, behind. Atrás, caprino, caprino, oprobio. So after a P, the same thing. After any consonant, except the consonant N. Enrique, Enrique. You see, that's a roll. Honra, that's the exception. Only after N like Nancy, then you roll. But and the L, but you're going to find, I believe, only one word in Spanish that has L-R combination. That's the word alrededor, because it comes from two words, alrededor. So alrededor is also rolled. Rewinding. R after consonant will be flipped, not rolled. Now let's go over the cases of rolled R's. And you need to write this down and figure out all the rules, because as I say, once you know the rules, there are no exceptions, you'll be able to apply them. When an R is initial in a word, important, in a word, rojo, rata, reto, Rita, ruta, and so on and so forth. No exceptions, it will be rolled. And it will be strongly rolled. When you roll in Spanish, you really roll strongly. So any word starting on an R. Second case, a double R written between vowels. Carro, perro, turrón, corro, and so on. Realize also that there are many words where you have both cases. You can have coro, meaning a choir or chorus, and corro, which means I run. So the difference between coro, flip, and corro has to be clear. Caro, which means expensive or dear, caro amigo, o esto es muy caro, this is very expensive, and carro, which means a vehicle, a car. Para, which means the preposition towards or for, para, and parra, which is a vine. Pero, the preposition but, pero, and perro, which is dog. So you need to be careful, otherwise you may be saying the wrong thing. Before consonant, I mentioned before. Example. Arte, arco, orca, turco. So before any consonant, you do roll. Not necessarily when you speak casually, but it helps when you sing for clarity. And the rolled R before a consonant does not sound strange or affected. It sounds perfectly natural. So we said, el arte. Sounds perfectly natural and perfectly good in Spanish. Now, the issue with at the end of words has to be clarified. Is it at the end of a sentence or a phrase, a singing phrase? For example, lo que pasa es el amor. At the end of the phrase, if you're stopping or breathing, do roll. Now, at the end of a word, when it's continued, all the rules apply that I have already stated. Meaning, if the word is followed by a vowel, amor a ti, amor a ti, 3 words. Amora becomes amor a becomes amora. So that R becomes intervocalic single R. If it's followed by a consonant, you know already that the rule is before consonant roll. So, amor te quiero, for example, you are going to roll. Amor terrible, amor me muero, whatever the consonant follows, you can roll. Okay, this is Pablo Zinger with chapter 3 of Spanish Diction for Singers. This chapter is devoted to what I call the softened consonants. And those are basically 3 consonants. The consonant D as in David, the consonant G as in George, and the consonants B as in boy and V as in Victor, which to us, Spanish speakers, are indistinguishable. So that means that to us, B as in boy and V as in Victor are the same letter basically. They are not pronounced according to spelling, they are pronounced equally according to where they are in a word, what actually precedes them. What do I mean by softened consonants? These consonants, when preceded by a vowel, any vowel or vowel sound, they are softened. In the case of the D consonant, instead of D like David, it becomes a the, as in TH, the TH of the, this, that, those, thus, and so on. Example, adios is not adios, is adios, because the D is preceded by a vowel. Educar is not educar, is educar, ido, mido, ludo, lado. Now, this is only when a vowel immediately precedes this. Whether it's in the same word or not, it doesn't matter, within the phrase. Now, for example, if I say the word dedo, meaning finger, and I'm starting dedo, the first one I'm starting, so that will be hard. That happens with any of those consonants. If I'm starting the phrase de, but if I'm going on after a vowel, dedo, dama, lady, dama, regular D. But la dama, that's a different story. Now, we also talked about madre, for example, when we talked about the flipped R. Madre, padre, that's also a TH. Remember, we're talking about the TH as in thus, this, those, not a TH as in thing. That's another TH sound. Let's go on with the next consonant. It's the consonant G as in George. Example, agua. It's not agua, it's agua. Gato, that's a hard G because I'm starting. Gato. However, if I say la gata, the G is preceded by a vowel. So, la gata. Or the word agata, as in agate, the stone. Agata. Even ignorante, like ignorant. That's still a soft G. But remember, it will be different when we're starting on a G, the phrase gata. That if I say la gata, la gota, preceded by a vowel. That will make it soft. So that soft G is not guttural, it's not in the throat. It's not g, where the throat moves. It is palatal, ga, la gata, la gata, la gota, la guitarra. For example, in Spanish, when we write G-U-I-G-U-E, guitarra, la guitarra, or la guerra. Now, if I said guitarra, guitar, that would be hard. Guitarra. However, if I say la guitarra, is preceded by a vowel, so it will be softened. Or la guerra, the war, guerra, hard, la guerra, softened. Now, what's the issue of the B and V? To us, B and V is the same letter. Most important rule, never, in Spanish, sing a V sound. Never say viva or verde. We don't use a V sound. We may spell it as a V as in Victor, but we don't use a V sound. Never. So that means, how do we know how to pronounce a V as in Victor or a B as in boy? If it is, either of them is preceded by a vowel, then they will be softened. How so? If I say cow, that's vaca. Spelled with a V as in Victor, vaca. So if I'm starting on it, doesn't matter if it's V as in Victor or B as in boy. Vaca or bajo, which means low or below, or I go down. Vaca, spelled with a V, pronounced with a B like boy, because it's initial. Bajo, spelled with a B as in boy, and also pronounced as a hard B. Bajo, ballena, bello, bella, vengo, I come. Victor, Veronica, Victoria. No Victor, Victoria or Veronica, no. Victor, Victoria, Veronica. All with a B like boy, spelled with a V, but pronounced with a hard B as in boy, because it's initial. Now, in any of these cases, if this were preceded by a vowel, again it will be softened. Example, where were you born? Venezuela. Venezuela, pronounced with a B like boy. Where are you going? A Venezuela, to Venezuela. A Venezuela. La vaca, la vaca. Now this is a little counterintuitive for English speakers, but that's the way it goes. La vaca, la vela, la bella. One spelled with a V, the other one with a B. La bella, long B, la vela, V as in Victor, both pronounced la ve, ave. Ave Maria, as in Ave Maria, is Ave Maria, ave, ave. Now technically, how do we do that V? This is a sound you don't have in English. How do you produce it? To do a V, you bite your lower lip, V. Now to do a soft V, you don't bite the lip. You barely touch and roll the lip and the lower lip under the upper lip. Laveo, ave, lava, lava. Now you don't press the lips. You don't go lava, because then you get a hard B. Lava, eva, iva, uva, ovario, so on and so forth. So it's V, very soft, without pressure. You barely touch the lips. With the consonants before the V or B, this varies. Árbol, for example, with the consonant R, árbol, that's a soft V. Arde, with a R that precedes, arde, arde, that's also a soft D. Árbol. However, consonants like M and N, those harden the B's and the other things too. Example, Andes, angustias. And there is an interesting case with an NV or NB combination. For example, un vino with a V is not pronounced un vino, it is pronounced vino. So N like Nancy, V like Victor becomes M like Mary, B like boy. Repeat, N like Nancy, V like Victor is pronounced M like Mary, B like boy. So un vino is pronounced vino. Just like N and B like boy, un beso, as in a kiss, beso. The N becomes an M sound. So in conclusion, when you have a D like David, a G like George, a V like Victor, or a B like boy, preceded by a vowel within a phrase, you will always pronounce them softly, as in adiós, agua, ave, abeja. Now, in some cases, for example, with a D at the end of a word or a phrase, D at the end of a phrase, example, the word Madrid, both of those D's are softened. Madrid. The first one because it's preceded by a vowel, second is also preceded by a vowel. Usually at the end of a phrase it's not very clearly articulated, but for example, as in the word verdad, verdad, truth, verdad. So it's not going to be very strong. You don't want to do verdad. You don't want to punch that, but verdad is a TH sound, as in that, those, and them. The letter C can have different sounds. If we have CA, CO, CU, it will be ka, ko, ku. It's a K sound, but not an exploded, as in English, K, ko, ki. No, it's ka, ke, ki, ko, ku. Well, actually, we're talking about ka, ko, ku spelled with a C. Because the sound ke and ki will have to be spelled Q-U-E, Q-U-I, as in ¿qué quieres? Quiero, ¿qué es eso? Alright, Q-U-E, Q-U-I. The same as we do in French, que, qui. Alright? Ka, ke, ki, ko, ku. Strongly and clearly articulated, but a K sound. Now G. If we have ga, go, gu, that can be hard ga, go, gu at the beginning like we said, or agua, agudo, agora, and so on. However, the spelling of G-U-E-G-U-I, ge, guerra, or la guerra, guitarra, la guitarra. So we covered that also with the soft consonants. The letter H has no sound, except after the letter C, when it becomes cha. Cha, che, chi, cho, chu. But if you have the word haga, hace, and so on, Hector, at the beginning of a word, or even in the middle, like ahora, A-H-O-R-A, ahora, it has no sound whatsoever. It also does not produce a glottal story. It's not ahora, ahora, legato. Now, the issue of the G and J sounds, as in the G-E-G-I. Example, general, as in general, spelled the same way. General, gitano, is also the case of the J letter. Jamás, jefe, jorobar, jugar. So the G-E-G-I combination, jeji, or ja, jeji, joju. This is one of the sounds in Spanish that varies significantly between different places, different countries, different dialects of Spanish. Most of the other stuff in Spanish is universal. It applies to any of the countries, any of the dialects, including the rolled R's, the soft consonants, the vowels. But the issue of the J varies pretty strongly. The strongest is the one from Spain. Jinete, jamás, jefe, and so on and so forth. Jugar. So that's a j as in Bach, a hard j, which is spelled in IPA as an X, written as an X. So if you're doing Castilian Spanish, you want to do those really hard, guttural. Jamás, jefe, jinete, jugar. Okay? Whether it is spelled G-E-G-I or with a J, it doesn't matter. The same case. However, as you go to Latin America, it gets a little softer in places like Mexico, a little softer in places like the Rio de la Plata, Argentina and Uruguay, but much softer in the Caribbean, as in Puerto Rico, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Venezuela, and so on and so forth. So there I might be like jefe, jamás, jirafa, joroba, ajo, and so on. More of an aspirated H. A similar situation happens with the issue of the Y sound, and this is rather delicate. Example, this applies to the double L, as in caballo, horse, allá, there, over there, calla, be quiet, and also to the Y letter before a vowel, as in haya, H-A-Y-A, hoyo, or hoyo, whenever a Y, as in yellow, is followed by a vowel. Now these sounds should be similar. If anybody tells you something else, they are wrong. I mean, in the old times, in some lost province of Spain, somebody made a difference between the Y and the double L, but no longer. So let's use some common words. Caballo, for example, horse. In Spain it would be caballo, caballo. If they tell you caballo, nobody says that in Spain. Caballo. Also the word yo, as in I, personal pronoun. Yo. You notice when I start a word with it, or llama, lleva, llena, there is a slight element of G there. It's a little bit like yellow, but yellow, with a little G thrown in and a high E sound. So, llave, lleno, lluvia, lloro, allí. Now, again, in the Caribbean, this would be softer. Caballo, caballo. There is a real ya, like yellow. Caballo, allí, llevo, llora. In a kind of very local exception, as in where I was born in the Rio de la Plata in Uruguay, or in Argentina, Buenos Aires, Montevideo, we use a hard J. So, caballo, llueve, llora. This you'll find, for example, in tango songs. coming from Argentina or Uruguay. Caballo, llora, llueve, allí, allá, yo quiero, yo ya llegué, I have already arrived. But this is an exception. You don't want to use that in standard Castilian. Let's remember this: allá, llego, llueve, llora, allí. Whether it is spelled with a double L or whether it is spelled with a Y. Now, when the Y is at the end of a syllable, as in ay or caimán, then it's a different story. That's an I sound. As in the word hoy, today, or I, like when you complain, ay. Okay? Even when you do several I's in a row, ay, canta y no llores. So that's another case. That's not considered before vowel, it's considered after vowel. The L, avoid doing an English L. Oh, we don't have that sound. It's el, lava, cartel. Whether it's at the beginning or the end, it's a front L. Lava, lema, lima, loma, luna. And at the end, cartel, el, hotel, el tal, and so on. So you don't do el tal, you do el tal, front L. Now going on to the M and N. M should be clear, la mano, mano, menos, mi. And so should the N. In the case of, you cannot have an M at the end of a word in Spanish, but you can, or a syllable, but you can have an N. So there is a difference between una, where there is a vowel following, una, ene, and en, un. That can be somewhat of a back N. Unta is not unta, it's u, you get a phantom vowel there, but it's unta, entra. So slightly a back N. Now what happens when you have an N like Nancy followed by an M like Mary? Un mono, a monkey, is pronounced mono. So there you get a double M. Generally in Spanish we don't have double consonants as in Italian, cotto, and so petto, and so on. Or mamma, we have mama. But in the case of N like Nancy followed by M like Mary, un mono, en mano, that kind of becomes a double M. We get to the P, and with the P it's a similar case with the K sound. You don't want to do pa, pe, pi, po, pu, but pa, pe, pi, po, pu, as in Pablo, Pedro, pileta, pozo or pozo. The P has to be clear, otherwise it will sound like a B. Don't go buño or bablo, a Pablo, no, a Pablo, el puño, and so on. By the way, when an N is followed by a P, it's the same as the N followed by a V or a B. Un puño, un Pablo, em Pablo. The N becomes M like Mary. N as in Nancy becomes M as in Mary in the pronunciation. Okay, the issue of the letter C before I and E, and the issue of the letter Z as in zebra. Here there is a clear distinction between Castilian Spanish from Spain and Latin American Spanish from any country. This is the issue. The combination CE, CI, as in cima or cielo, silencio, and the CE combination as in celos, celeste, and so on, In Spain, the CI-CE combination is pronounced th, as in the letter TH in English, in the case of thing, and thong, and that kind of thing. So this is the IPA, is the oval with the line in the middle, which is a th, showing the lips with the tongue in the middle. This also applied to the letter Z, as in zebra, in any kind of combination in Castilian Spanish. Example: azul, A-Z-U-L, blue, azul. Loza, L-O-Z-A. Zaragoza, goza, enjoys. Gozo, luz, as in light. Oz, haz, as in the imperative form of do this. So wherever a Z letter is in Castilian Spanish, as in Madrid and the center of Spain, it will be pronounced tha. However, in Latin American Spanish, the CI-CE and the Z letter anywhere it is will be pronounced like a regular unvoiced S. Example: cielo azul in Latin America. Cielo azul, blue sky, sky blue. Cielo azul in Castilian Spanish. Zorro, fox in Castilian Spanish, but zorro in Latin American Spanish. Zapato, written with a Z, meaning shoe. Zapato in Latin American Spanish, but zapato in Spanish, Castilian Spanish. Luz in Latin American Spanish, luz in Castilian Spanish. Now then you have the complication of the SC. Example: escena, like the scene. Escena, E-S-C, escena. Los cientos, the hundreds. Piscina, as in a swimming pool. Piscina, S-C. However, in Latin America it would be piscina, escena, without the th sound. Ascensor, as in elevator. Ascensor in Spain, A-S-C-E. Ascen, ascen. But in Latin America it's ascensor, without the th. Now, how do you decide how to use this? If you're doing a piece where you want to sound like a native person from Madrid or around there, Aragon and environs, then you might as well do ascensor, el cielo azul, the blue sky, and so on. If you're doing something that's from Latin America, or even from the south of Spain, where they speak more similar to Latin American, or from Canary Islands, where they also speak similar to Latin America, then you don't bother with that. Everything is an S sound. So now we have the letter S, as in Sam. Normally the letter S has an unvoiced S sound. S. And this also applies differently from Italian, Portuguese, French, English, and so on, German, and a lot of other languages. When it's intervocalic, as in the word rosa or cosa, cose, we don't go, as in Italian, rosa, cosa. In Italian, you have to write a double S for it to sound unvoiced. R-O-S-S-A, rossa, which means red. Or casa, as opposed to casa, casa house, casa is a box. But in Spanish you don't have that distinction, because you have only rosa, amorosa. At the end, at the beginning of a word is the same. Sal, sol, solo. So it's still an unvoiced S. At the end of the word, same thing. Cosas, rosas. The only exception, and it's not a voice S what you get, but it's a Z sound, is before certain voice consonants, as in esdrújula, las madres. When the S is followed by a D or an M, for example, las madres, the mothers. Las madres. Es mejor, it is better. Es mejor becomes es mejor. The S can be, and should be in the case of Castilian, can be voice. Es mejor, es mero, es madre. Los mira. But this varies from country to country. In my country, for example, in Uruguay or Argentina, we would say es mejor las madres. So it is not really that big a deal. If you want to be very correct in Castilian, though, you might as well sing es mejor las madres, and so on. Same with a D. Es de Pablo. It is of Pablo. Es de Pablo. So it becomes the. And the D sound after the Z, after the voice S, will be a TH as in the. Es de. If you didn't use the Z, es de, then you get an S sound and a hard E. Either is possible, and it varies, as I say, according to region and country. What you'll never have is a voice S as in rosa, amorosa, amoroso. No. Rosa, amorosa, amoroso, cosa, and so on. The T is the same case as the K sound and the P sound. It should be clear but not exploded. So it's not ta te tito tu, it is ta te tito tu, ta te tito tu. Tras, or also sometimes happens before a consonant. Tras, tres. Clear but not exploded. The X letter, pronounced like a KS. Exacto. Not exacto, but exacto. Exijo. Exuberante. Not exuberante, but exu. KS. Exuberante. Exacto. You would also have often the combination XC and excelente, where it become a K-th, or excelente. In Castilian Spanish, XC, excelente. In Latin American Spanish, excelente, KS. Exceso. But in Latin American Spanish, exceso. So pretty much that covers everything in Spanish. Except for the issue that generally in Spanish we don't do glottal stops. So if you have a combination of vowels like a, o, e, I, which you often have when you combine words or syllables, ahora, la hora, la era, la ira, lo iba, le iba, so on. You don't go la hora. You don't divide. La hora. No glottal stop. No interruption. La hora, la iba. Generally, when you have a string of words in Spanish, they are all pronounced as if they were a long word. Everything is legato. The same way you combine an R or an L or any kind of consonant at the end of a word. Let's see, el arzobispo de Constantinopla se quiso desarzobispo constantinopolitanizar. Hábil desarzobispo constantinopolitanizador será quien lo desarzobispo constantinopolitanizare. As you see, I don't make any kind of stop. Everything is continuous. And the same happens when you sing. So I think I've covered everything in Spanish Diction. I hope I'm not forgetting anything. Enjoy and study.